When I unlocked the front door of my Colorado cabin after 18 months away, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Fresh pine cleaner. The kind my late wife Margaret used to buy in bulk from the hardware store in town. That smell had no business being in a house that had been sealed shut since the summer before last. Then I saw the boot prints on the hardwood floor. That's when I remembered the motion-activated cameras my son had installed in the basement 2 years ago. I pulled up the app on my phone. What I saw on that screen made my blood run cold. I'm glad you're here with me for this. Before I go on, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from right now. What time is it where you are? I'd love to know who's joining me tonight. The drive up from Denver always took about 3 hours, winding through mountain passes that got narrower the higher you climbed. My old Ford truck knew every curve by memory. Margaret and I had made this trip together for 22 years, ever since we bought the cabin as a fixer-upper when our son David was still in high school. She'd loved the isolation, no neighbors for half a mile, just elk, pine trees, and the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Margaret passed 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, fast and merciless. After that, the cabin felt like a museum of everything I'd lost. Her reading glasses still on the nightstand. Her hiking boots by the back door. I couldn't bring myself to move any of it, so I just stopped coming. David had been after me to sell the place, said it was a waste, sitting empty. He and his wife Sarah had their own problems. David lost his position as a financial auditor at a major pharmaceutical company about 10 months ago. Whistleblower retaliation, he said, though he never explained the details. Sarah had gone quiet too. She used to call me every Sunday. Now weeks passed without a word. When I did reach her, her voice sounded thin and rehearsed, like she was reading from a script someone else had written. I'd driven up on a Tuesday in late November because the property management company sent me a letter. They said they'd noticed activity at the cabin during a routine area check. Lights on at odd hours. A vehicle parked in the back. They wanted to confirm I'd authorized it. I hadn't. The boot prints led from the front door through the living room and down the hallway toward the basement. Men's boots, size 11 or 12. David wore a 10. These weren't his. In the kitchen, the propane heater was running on low. I'd shut off the gas line 18 months ago. Someone had reconnected it. The kitchen sink was dry but clean. No dust anywhere. The countertops had been wiped recently. A faint ring of coffee stains sat on the counter near the window. The kind you get from setting a mug down over and over in the same spot. My heart did that thing it used to do back in Korea. I served 2 years there in the early 80s. Not combat exactly, but close enough. Intelligence work. Reconnaissance. Reading terrain and patterns. Figuring out what didn't belong. That instinct never leaves you. And right now, every nerve in my body was firing. I went to the basement door. It was unlocked. The stairs creaked as I descended. Margaret's voice echoed in my head, the way it always did when I was about to do something she'd call reckless. Robert, think before you act. You're not 25 anymore. The basement looked different. My old workbench had been pushed against the far wall. The boxes of Christmas decorations Margaret had labeled in her careful handwriting were stacked in a corner, moved from their usual spot near the furnace. In their place sat something new. A steel shelving unit, industrial grade, bolted to the concrete floor. On it, 3 black plastic storage bins with combination locks. I touched one. Cold. Heavy. Whatever was inside had weight to it. That's when I pulled up the camera app. David had installed 2 cameras down here after we'd had a break-in attempt years ago. Hidden in the ceiling joists, nearly invisible. I'd forgotten about them until this moment. I scrolled back through the footage. Months of nothing. Dark basement, occasional furnace cycling on and off. Then, September 14th, movement. David appeared on screen at 11:47 p.m. He wasn't alone. Sarah was behind him, carrying a duffel bag, her face tight with fear. She kept looking over her shoulder at the stairs as if expecting someone to follow them down. David moved with purpose, not panic, but controlled urgency. He set up the shelving unit first, working with a drill and level for nearly an hour. Then, he and Sarah began unloading the duffel bags. 3 of them. Heavy enough that David's arms shook as he lifted each bin onto the shelf. They spoke to each other in whispers. The cameras had no audio, but I could read their body language. David's jaw was set, determined. Sarah kept touching her stomach. She was pregnant. I didn't know that. My own daughter-in-law was expecting, and nobody had told me. Over the next 6 weeks, the footage showed David returning alone 4 more times. Each visit, he added something to the bins. Documents, from what I could tell. Folders, binders, what looked like external hard drives. On his 3rd visit, he brought a fireproof safe and bolted it to the wall behind the water heater, the kind rated for 2 hours at 1200 degrees. The most recent footage was from 9 days ago. Sarah came alone. She stood in the basement for a long time, hands on her belly, staring at the shelving unit. Then she sat on the bottom step and cried. Deep, shaking sobs. She pulled out her phone, started to dial, then stopped. Put the phone away. Wiped her face. Went back upstairs. My pregnant daughter-in-law had been sitting in my basement, sobbing alone, and I hadn't known. I called David. 3 rings, then voicemail. David, it's Dad. I'm at the cabin. We need to talk. Call me. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Not David. Sarah. Dad. Her voice was careful. David said you called. I'm at the cabin, Sarah. Someone's been using it. Oh. She paused too long. We've checked on it a few times. Made sure the pipes didn't freeze. Sarah, there are locked bins in my basement. A fireproof safe bolted to my wall. The gas is on. Someone's been living here. Silence. Then, very quietly, please don't open anything. Please, I'm begging you. Why? Because if you open those bins, you become part of this, and I can't let that happen to you. Not with everything else. What is this about? Dad, please. Her voice cracked. Just lock the door and drive home. Pretend you were never here. For the baby's sake. For all of us. A sound in the background. David's voice, sharp and urgent, telling her to hang up. I have to go. Please, Dad. Please just leave. The line went dead. I stood in that basement, surrounded by my dead wife's Christmas decorations and whatever my son had hidden in my house. Margaret would have told me to call the police, but Margaret also would have told me to protect our son first. I chose David. I went upstairs, found the toolbox in the garage, and came back with bolt cutters. The first bin's lock snapped after 2 attempts. Inside, stacks of documents in clear plastic sleeves, financial records, spreadsheets dense with numbers, bank routing information, internal emails printed and highlighted, every page stamped with a company logo I recognized. Meridian Pharmaceuticals. My stomach dropped. Meridian had been in the news for months. Their CEO, Victor Hale, was under investigation for inflating drug trial results, bribing FDA officials, and burying evidence that their best-selling pain medication caused fatal cardiac episodes. 6 people had died in clinical trials. The families were suing. Hale denied everything. Wood had worked at Meridian for 7 years before they terminated him. The second bin contained USB drives, each labeled with dates and project codes, a laptop sealed in a waterproof bag, and photographs, dozens of them. Photos of documents, whiteboards, private meetings captured through office windows. David had been building a case, methodically and secretly, for what looked like years. The third bin held a sealed manila envelope. Inside, a handwritten letter in David's careful engineer's handwriting. Dad, if you're reading this, I've failed to protect you from this. I'm sorry. Everything in these bins is evidence of criminal conduct at Meridian Pharmaceuticals. Falsified trial data. Bribery. 6 deaths they knew about and covered up. I documented it because I thought the right thing to do was obvious. I was wrong. The right thing nearly killed us. I tried to go to the authorities. A reporter at the Denver Post, Julia Mendez, agreed to investigate. 2 weeks later, her car was broken into and her laptop stolen. She dropped the story. I contacted a federal attorney. He reviewed the documents, said they were explosive. Then he stopped returning my calls. His firm took on Meridian as a client the following month. Sarah found out 3 months ago. I didn't want her involved, but she found the drives. She was terrified, not just for us, but for the baby. She's due in February. I've put everything here because our apartment has been searched twice. Nothing taken, just moved. They're letting us know they can reach us any time. If you're reading this, it means they've found us, or I've run out of options. The evidence in these bins can bring down Victor Hale and everyone who helped him cover up those deaths. but it can also destroy our family if it's used wrong. I trust you, Dad. You spent your whole career building bridges and structures that could withstand pressure. This is the same thing. Find the right foundation, and the truth will hold. I love you. Tell Sarah I'm sorry. Tell the baby their father tried to do the right thing. I sat on the cold concrete floor, my son's letter in my hands, and felt every one of my 69 years. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text message. Mr. Coleman, this is a friend. Your son made promises to people who don't accept broken promises. You have something they want. If you'd like to resolve this without anyone getting hurt, meet me at the Red Rock Diner off Highway 9. 1 hour. Come alone. I stared at the message. Before I could respond, headlights swept across the basement window. A vehicle pulling into my driveway. Then another. I moved to the small basement window and peered out. 2 black SUVs. 4 men stepped out. Dark coats. One of them tried the front door, found it locked. He spoke into a phone. My hands trembled, but my mind was clear. Korea had taught me that. When the situation goes sideways, panic is the first enemy. I grabbed the fireproof safe. It was heavy, maybe 40 pounds, but adrenaline is a remarkable thing. I also grabbed 2 USB drives from the second bin and shoved them into my coat pocket. Upstairs, the front door handle rattled. Then, a heavy knock. Mr. Coleman, we're associates of Victor Hale. We'd like to have a conversation. I was already at the back of the basement, the old coal chute. Margaret had wanted it sealed years ago, said it was a security risk. I'd been lazy about it. For once, laziness saved me. The metal door protested, but swung open. Cold mountain air rushed in. I pushed the safe through first, then squeezed my body after it. My shoulders barely fit. My back screamed. My knees hit frozen ground. Behind me, inside the house, the sound of a door being forced open. Heavy footsteps on the floor above. I grabbed the safe and moved. Not running. A 69-year-old man with a bad hip and 40 pounds of evidence doesn't run through mountain terrain in November. But I moved with purpose, heading for the tree line 50 yards behind the cabin. The snow was thin, just enough to leave tracks. Couldn't be helped. The tree line swallowed me. Darkness and pine. I knew these woods. 22 years of hiking with Margaret. I knew where the creek ran, where the old fire road connected to the county highway, where cell service dropped out and picked back up. I need to get to higher ground, Margaret's voice said in my mind. Remember the overlook? The one where we watched the sunset on our anniversary? The overlook was a quarter-mile uphill. From there, I'd have cell service and line of sight to the highway. My hip protested every step. The safe felt heavier with each minute, but I kept moving. Behind me, flashlights bobbed through the trees. They'd found my tracks in the snow. Mr. Coleman, you're making this harder than it needs to be. We just want what your son took. Give it back, and this all goes away. I didn't answer, didn't slow down. The creek appeared, black water over stones. I waded in. Ice cold hit my boots. I gasped, but kept going. Water hides tracks. Korea taught me that too. I followed the creek upstream for 100 yards, then climbed out on the opposite bank and headed uphill. My lungs burned. My legs shook. The flashlights behind me had stopped at the creek, confused, sweeping both banks. I reached the overlook 10 minutes later, collapsed against a boulder, pulled out my phone. 2 bars of service. I called David first. This time he answered. Dad. His voice was raw. Where are you? Overlook above the cabin. 4 men broke in. I have the safe and 2 drives. They're in the woods behind me. Dad. Oh God. I'm so sorry. I never wanted this. David, listen to me. I need you to call your cousin Patrick right now. He's with the FBI field office in Denver. Tell him everything. And call 911 for the cabin address. Dad, you can't trust local police. Hale has people everywhere. A sheriff's deputy in Grand County is on his payroll. I have proof. Then Patrick first. FBI only. Do it now. I hung up and dialed 911 myself. Reported armed intruders at my property. The dispatcher said units were 20 minutes out. In the mountains, 20 minutes might as well be an hour. My phone buzzed again. The unknown number. Shame you didn't come to the diner. Would have been easier. You don't know who you're dealing with, Mr. Coleman. Hale has friends in places you can't imagine. Federal judges, senators. Your nephew Patrick is a good man, but he's one agent against an army. They knew about Patrick. They were monitoring our calls. I powered off my phone, sat in the darkness, clutching that safe against my chest like it was my grandchild. Stars overhead. Absolute silence except for my own breathing and the distant creak. Margaret had always said I was stubborn to a fault. She'd meant it as criticism, mostly. But stubbornness has its uses. I wasn't going to let these men take what my son had risked everything to protect. I wasn't going to let 6 dead people stay unavenged because a billionaire had enough money to make evidence disappear. 30 minutes passed. Then I heard it. Not footsteps. A helicopter. Searchlight. Cutting through the tree canopy. But it didn't have the profile of a news chopper or a sheriff's unit. It moved with military precision, sweeping a grid pattern over the woods. Then, from the highway below, sirens, multiple vehicles, red and blue lights flickering through the trees. Not local police, FBI tactical units, black SUVs with federal plates. The helicopter banked away. Flashlights emerged from the trail below. But these carried badges. Mr. Coleman, FBI, your nephew sent us. Are you hurt? I stood up on shaking legs. I'm fine. I have the evidence. Special Agent Rachel Kwan was in her late 30s, sharp and direct. She helped me down the trail while 2 agents carried the safe. They loaded me into a warm SUV and handed me coffee. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the cup. Back at the cabin, the intruders were gone. The SUVs vanished. The only trace was my broken back door and boot prints in the snow. Kwan's team photographed everything. They drove me to a federal facility in Denver. A nondescript building downtown. Conference room, fluorescent lights. The kind of room where lives change direction. Kwan sat across from me while technicians worked on the safe and USB drives in the next room. Mr. Coleman, your son David approached our office 14 months ago with initial evidence against Meridian. We've been building a case, but Hale's legal team has blocked us at every turn. Destroyed servers. Intimidated witnesses. 3 people who cooperated with our investigation have had their lives disrupted. One had a fatal accident that we couldn't prove was anything else. David was working with you? Initially, yes. He gave us a partial file set. Then something changed about 8 months ago. He stopped communicating. Went dark. That's when they fired him. Kwan nodded. We believe Hale's security team identified David as the source. After termination, David became erratic. Made contact with people outside our operation. She opened a folder. One of them was a man named Marcus Webb. She showed me a photograph. Hard face, expensive suit. Webb is Victor Hale's fixer. He handles problems. When David was fired, Webb approached him with an offer. $500,000 for every copy of the evidence. Plus, new identities for David, Sarah, and the baby. My stomach twisted. David wouldn't sell out. He didn't. But he also didn't tell us about the approach. Instead, he started making copies, hiding them in multiple locations. Your cabin, a storage unit in Boulder, and somewhere we haven't identified yet. Why wouldn't he just give everything to you? Because David didn't trust us either. Kwan's voice was measured. 3 months ago, we discovered that one of our own agents had been feeding information to Hale's legal team. That's how they knew about David. That's how they knew about the reporter, the attorney. The leak came from inside our office. The room felt smaller suddenly. We've since identified and removed the compromised agent, but the damage was done. David had reason not to trust federal agencies. He decided to protect the evidence himself and put it in my basement. Kwan paused. There's more. She turned her laptop toward me. We found communications on the USB drives, not just evidence against Meridian. David also documented communications between Webb and a sitting U.S. congressman, payments for legislative protection, votes on pharmaceutical regulation that were effectively purchased. She showed me the screen. Names, dates, dollar amounts. The scope was staggering. This isn't just a corporate fraud case anymore, she said. This is systemic corruption. Your son didn't just find dirt on a drug company. He uncovered a network. A knock on the door. Another agent entered, whispered to Kwan. Her expression shifted. Mr. Coleman, we have a problem. David and Sarah were being transported to a safe house 40 minutes ago. The vehicle was intercepted on I-70, not violently, a staged traffic stop. Fake police officers. My heart stopped. Are they okay? We don't know. We've lost contact. The next 2 hours were the worst of my life. Worse than Margaret's diagnosis. Worse than anything. I sat in that room imagining every terrible possibility. My son, my pregnant daughter-in-law, in the hands of people who had already killed to protect their secrets. Then Kwan's phone rang. She listened, said 3 words, hung up. They're safe. David called from a gas station outside Vale. The fake officers tried to take them to a secondary location. David crashed the car into a guardrail at low speed. While the fake officers dealt with the wreck, David and Sarah ran into a nearby restaurant and called 911. Local police responded. Real ones this time. Agents are bringing them here now, Kwan said. When David walked through that door 2 hours later, I didn't say a word, just held him. He was shaking. Sarah was behind him, one hand on her belly, mascara streaked down her face. I'm sorry, Dad. David's voice broke. I tried to handle it alone. I thought I could protect everyone. I held his shoulders and looked him in the eye. You don't protect your family by shutting them out. You protect your family by letting them stand with you. He broke down. My grown son, 37 years old, crying in my arms like he was 7 again and had fallen off his bicycle. Sarah hugged me next. The baby kicked against my chest. I nearly lost it right there. Over the next week, everything moved fast. The evidence was forensically verified. Every document, every email, every bank record. David and Sarah spent 3 days in debriefing sessions. Federal prosecutors assembled a case that filled 4 filing cabinets. The compromised congressman resigned before charges were even filed. His office released a statement blaming health issues. Nobody believed it. Marcus Webb was arrested at Denver International Airport, trying to board a flight to Sao Paulo. He had a briefcase containing $800,000 in cashier's checks and 3 burner phones. Victor Hale fought. His legal team filed every motion imaginable. Delays, dismissals, jurisdiction challenges. But the evidence was too complete. David hadn't just collected documents. He'd built a prosecution-ready archive, cross-referenced, time-stamped, verified through multiple independent sources. The trial lasted 5 weeks. David testified for 2 days. Calm, precise, devastating. He described watching colleagues falsify safety data while 6 families buried their loved ones. He described being threatened, being followed, finding his apartment ransacked, making the decision to hide the evidence in my cabin because it was the one place nobody would think to look. Sarah testified too. She described the fear, the isolation, finding out she was pregnant and realizing her child would be born into a family on the run. The jury watched her with the kind of attention that tells you they've already made up their minds. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon. I was at the cabin, fixing the back door the intruders had broken. My phone rang. David, guilty, Dad. All 38 counts. Hale, Webb, the congressman's chief of staff, and 4 others. Guilty on everything. I sat down on the porch steps. The mountains stretched out before me, snow-capped and indifferent to human drama. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for months. That evening, I drove down to Denver. David and Sarah's apartment was warm, lit with lamps Margaret would have loved. Sarah was in the kitchen, 6 months along now, making pasta. David opened the door and smiled. A real smile. The first one I'd seen from him in over a year. We ate dinner together. Simple food. Conversation about the baby, about names, about whether they'd need a bigger apartment. Normal things. Precious things. After Sarah went to bed, David and I sat on the balcony with bourbon. The city lights of Denver spread out below. I almost didn't hide it at the cabin, David said quietly. I almost destroyed everything. Thought if I just made it all disappear, they'd leave us alone. What stopped you? He looked at me. You did. Not directly. But I kept thinking about what you would do. You spent 40 years building things. Bridges, buildings, structures designed to hold up under pressure. You never cut corners. Never took the easy way. I thought, what would Dad build? I didn't know what to say to that, so I just put my hand on his shoulder and we sat there together in the cold, watching the city breathe. 3 months later, the baby arrived. A girl. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. They named her Margaret. I held her in the hospital room, this tiny new person wrapped in a pink blanket, and I felt something I hadn't felt since my Margaret died. Hope. Not the fragile kind that breaks when you test it. The kind built on bedrock. The kind that survives pressure. Sarah watched me with tired, grateful eyes. "She's got your stubbornness already," she said. "Wouldn't come out until she was good and ready." "That's not stubbornness," I said. "That's patience. There's a difference." David laughed. The sound filled the room. The following summer, I drove up to the cabin one last time. Not to hide anything, not to run from anything, just to sit on the porch and watch the elk graze in the meadow the way Margaret and I used to. The basement was clean. The shelving unit removed. The coal chute finally sealed, as Margaret had wanted years ago. The only evidence of what had happened was a small patch on the wall behind the water heater where the safe had been bolted. I'd spackled it myself, sanded it smooth, painted over it. My phone buzzed. A message from David, a photo of baby Margaret in the backyard, grass-stained knees, reaching for a butterfly. Underneath, 3 words, "Thank you, Dad." I typed back, "No more secrets." His reply was instant. "No more secrets. Promise." I believed him. Not because I was naive, because I'd watched him choose truth over safety, honesty over comfort. He'd made terrible mistakes along the way, kept me in the dark, put the family at risk with his stubbornness. But when it mattered, he'd done what was right. That counts for something. That counts for everything. The sun dropped behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of copper and violet. Margaret would have made me take a photo. She would have said something about how God saves his best work for the end of the day. I'm 69 years old. My hip aches when it rains. My hands shake when I'm tired. I look exactly like what I am, an old man who's seen too much and slept too little. But I've never felt more certain about anything in my life. Age isn't a weakness. It's everything you've survived, everything you've learned, compressed into instinct. When those men came to my door, I didn't fight them. I outthought them. When my son shut me out, I didn't force my way in. I waited until he needed me. And when the moment came to run through frozen woods with 40 pounds of evidence and a bad hip, I did it because that's what fathers do. We carry what our children can't, for as long as our legs hold out. Margaret used to say the strongest structures aren't the ones built to resist pressure. They're the ones built to bend without breaking. I think she was talking about bridges, but I think she was also talking about families. This is my true story. I'm sharing it because someone listening right now might be where David was a year ago, carrying a secret too heavy for one person, afraid to trust anyone. If that's you, hear me. You don't have to do this alone. The people who love you would rather share the weight than watch you collapse under it. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment below. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it. Your support keeps these stories alive. Thank you for listening. Stay safe out there. And remember, the truth is heavy, but it's never heavier than a lie.